my husband mocked. So what's your big plan? Just divorce me? Upon finding him with my very own sister, I uttered not a sound, simply went to the room and began packing. Their amusement died the moment they saw what went inside my case. Can you imagine the earth-shattering moment you discover your entire life is a lie? That the man you've loved for 25 years, your husband, has been secretly seeing someone else, and that someone is your own sister? This isn't just a story. It's the night my world exploded. The day had started so normally. Painfully normal, almost. I'd left the office around 5, feeling that quiet hum of satisfaction that comes after a really productive week. I'm a partner at an architecture firm, one I helped build from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. And though the hours are long, I love it. There's a solidity to it, a permanence in creating spaces where people will live their lives. It was a feeling of control, I guess. A feeling that I was the architect of my own life, too. On the way home, I stopped at the gourmet market. Fresh pasta, a bottle of Chianti. Walter loved it when I made my bolognese from scratch. It's a small thing, but after 25 years of marriage, you learn that love often lives in those tiny gestures. In knowing their favorite wine. In making their favorite meal on a Thursday just because our house? That was my sanctuary. A beautiful 2-story colonial I'd designed myself years ago. Nestled in a quiet, leafy suburb, every detail, from the reclaimed oak floors to the Carrara marble in the kitchen, was something I had chosen with care. It was more than a house. It was a testament to the life I thought I had built. Solid. Permanent. When I got home, Walter was already there, in the living room. He was ostensibly reading the paper, but I could see his phone propped up behind it. "Hey, you!" I called, dropping my keys and the grocery bags on the hall table. "Smells like you showered." "Long day," he said, folding the paper with a rustle. Thought I'd wash it off. He came over, gave me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. Routine, practiced, the kind of kiss that doesn't mean anything beyond habit. We made dinner together. Or, rather, I cooked while he leaned against the counter, scrolling on his phone, occasionally telling me about his day. His boss was a jerk, quarterly reports were a nightmare. The usual complaints. I listened, offered sympathetic noises, and chopped onions. It was the familiar dance of our evenings, a choreography we'd perfected over 2.5 decades. After dinner, we settled onto the couch. A plush, custom-made sectional in soft gray fabric that had taken me 6 months to choose. I remember thinking about that. The absurd amount of time I'd spent on paint swatches and fabric samples, all to create this perfect, peaceful home. The gas fireplace was on, just for the ambiance. Its soft orange light flickered across the framed photos on the mantelpiece. Our wedding, him looking so handsome and nervous. Family vacations to the Grand Canyon, our faces wind-burned and smiling. And then there was the photo of my younger sister, Brenda's college graduation. Me and Walter standing on either side of her, beaming with pride. A whole life, captured in polished silver frames. I was 52, an age where you believe the foundation of your life is set in stone. You've weathered the storms. You've raised your hypothetical children. You've settled into the comfortable, predictable rhythm of a long marriage. You think you know the person sitting next to you better than you know the back of your own hand. I picked up a design magazine. Walter was on his phone. He was supposed to be looking up reviews for a new French restaurant to celebrate our anniversary. 25 years, a quarter of a century. It felt monumental, a milestone that deserved champagne and celebration. But he wasn't looking at restaurants. His phone buzzed. A low, discreet vibration from inside his pocket. He pulled it out, his movements just a little too quick, a little too guarded. He angled the screen away from me. A subtle shift of his body that screamed secrecy. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the placid surface of our evening. But my architect's eye for detail, for things that are misaligned, caught it immediately. Then he smiled. It wasn't his usual smile. It wasn't the tired end-of-day smile he gave me, or the polite, thin-lipped smile for the neighbors. This was a secret smile. A private, lit-from-within smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. My breath caught in my throat. It was the one he used to give me when we were first dating, back when a simple text from me could make him light up from across a crowded room. Seeing that smile now, directed at a cold, glowing screen, it felt like a physical blow. A punch to the gut that left me winded. Another buzz. More smiling. He started typing with both thumbs, his brow furrowed in concentration, completely and utterly absorbed. The world outside that little rectangle of light The crackling fire, the soft music playing, his wife of 25 years sitting 3 feet away, had ceased to exist for him. "Find anything good?" I asked, my voice sounding strained and artificially bright even to my own ears. He jumped, startled, as if he'd forgotten I was even in the room. He quickly locked his phone and set it face down on the cushion between us. "Oh, yeah. Just an old buddy from college, Mark. Sent a funny meme about his kid." Something felt profoundly wrong. A cold knot started to form in my stomach. Walter's college friends were my friends too. Mark always sent funny things to our old group chat, not to Walter personally in the middle of the night. But I let it go. You don't detonate a 25-year marriage over a text message. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, that it's your own insecurity talking. You tell yourself to trust him. So I tried. I picked up my magazine, but the elegant blueprints and glossy photos just swam on the page. I couldn't concentrate. All I could see was that smile. That specific, intimate smile that no longer belonged to me. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. This man I had shared a bed with for over 9,000 nights. And for the first time in our life together, he felt like a complete and utter stranger. The silence in the room grew heavy, pregnant with all the things that weren't being said. The peaceful home I had designed to be my sanctuary suddenly felt like a stage set, fragile and fake. And I had the terrifying feeling that the curtain was about to come down. The knot in my stomach didn't go away. It stayed there through the night, a cold, hard lump of dread that made sleep impossible. I lay in our bed, listening to the sound of Walter's even breathing beside me, and felt a chasm opening between us. Every time he shifted in his sleep, I flinched. I replayed the scene on the couch over and over in my head, analyzing every detail, every nuance, trying to convince myself I had imagined it, that I had overreacted. But the image of that smile was burned into my mind. The next day, Friday, I tried to bury myself in work. I went to the office. I sat in meetings about load-bearing walls and zoning variances. I went through the motions of my normal, structured life, but it was like watching a movie of someone else's day. The little voice in the back of my head kept whispering, kept replaying that secret smile. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was a grown woman, a partner in a successful firm, not some hysterical, insecure teenager. But the feeling wouldn't go away. That evening, the fragile peace I had tried to reconstruct was shattered for good. The evening started with a tense, almost suffocating normalcy. I suggested we order takeout, not having the energy to cook. Walter readily agreed, maybe a little too quickly. He seemed eager to keep things simple, to avoid any real conversation. We ate in front of the TV, watching some mindless sitcom, the sound of the canned laughter filling the space where our own conversation should have been. After dinner, I was in the kitchen, rinsing the plates. Walter was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone again. The same posture, the same intense focus. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it didn't mean anything. His phone buzzed. A loud, clear notification sound this time. He'd left the volume on. He set it face down on the granite countertop, the screen dark, and said, "I'm going to grab that bottle of red from the pantry." The good stuff. He walked out of the kitchen. And in that moment, the universe, or fate, or whatever you want to call it, gave me a choice. I could respect his privacy. I could turn back to my bubbling sink of soapy water, dry the plates, and live with the gnawing, corrosive uncertainty for the rest of my life. Or I could know. I stood there for a long 10 seconds, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear him rustling around in the pantry, humming a little tune. The sound was so normal, so domestic. It made the situation feel even more surreal. "Just turn it over, Audrey," the voice in my head urged. "You have to know." My hand trembled as I reached for the phone. It felt heavy in my hand, like it contained the weight of my entire future. The glass was cool and smooth against my skin. I took a deep, shuddering breath and flipped it over. The screen lit up. And there it was. A notification preview from a text message, clear as day. My brain registered the words before it could process the horror. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You were amazing." For a split second, my mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. An affair? He was having an affair. The pain was sharp, immediate. A white-hot poker to the chest. But it was the name below the message that made the world stop spinning. The name that turned the sharp pain into a soul-crushing implosion, that vaporized everything I thought I knew. It wasn't a name I didn't know. It wasn't some stranger, some coworker, some random woman I could hate from a distance. The name was Brenda. My sister, my baby sister. The little girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged. The awkward teenager I had coached through her first date. The maid of honor at my wedding, who had given a tearful speech about how I was her hero. The woman whose photo was on my mantelpiece, smiling her bright, beautiful smile right next to mine. I couldn't breathe. The air was sucked out of my lungs as if by a vacuum. The sound of the running water in the sink faded into a dull, distant roar in my ears. I stared at the name, my sister's name, on my husband's phone, next to those words. And my reality fractured into a million jagged pieces. It wasn't just a crack in the mirror anymore. The mirror had been smashed to dust, and the reflection staring back at me was a woman I no longer recognized, living a life that was a complete and utter lie. I heard the pantry door open. I heard Walter walking back towards me, the bottle of wine clinking against the corkscrew in his hand. He was still humming that little tune, completely and utterly oblivious. And I just stood there, frozen, holding the evidence of their unimaginable betrayal in my hand, the heat from the phone burning like a brand against my palm. Time seemed to slow down to a thick, syrupy crawl. I could feel the cold of the granite countertop seeping into my fingertips where I gripped the edge for support, the only thing keeping me upright. Walter stopped humming when he saw my face. The casual smile dropped from his lips. "Audrey, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to speak, but no sound came out. My throat had closed up. I just turned the phone around, my hand shaking so violently the screen seemed to vibrate, and held it out for him to see. His eyes scanned the screen. I watched his face, desperately searching for any sign of remorse, of panic, of shame. There was nothing. I saw a flicker of annoyance, quickly masked. He looked like a teenager who'd been caught breaking curfew, not a man who had just dynamited his 25-year marriage. He let out a long theatrical sigh. "Look, it's not what you think. The sheer insulting weakness of that cliché, the most pathetic line in the cheater's handbook. It finally broke my paralysis. Not what I think?" My voice was a choked, ragged whisper I barely recognized as my own. "It says Brenda. My Brenda, and it says, you were amazing last night." Each word was a shard of glass I had to force out of my throat. He had the audacity to look bored, put upon. He gently took the phone from my trembling hand and slipped it into his pocket, as if hiding the evidence would make it disappear. "You're overreacting. You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I whispered. Just then, the back door clicked open, and in walked Brenda. She was carrying a bag from a local bakery, a bright, cheerful smile on her face. "Hey, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd bring dessert. They have that lemon tart you love, Audie." She used my childhood nickname, and the sound of it on her lips now was a desecration. Her smile faltered as she took in the scene. She looked from my ashen face to Walter's tense posture. A quick, calculating glance passed between the two of them. And in that single, fleeting glance, I saw everything. There was no surprise, no confusion, just recognition. She knew. Of course she knew. She wasn't an innocent party caught in the crossfire. She was the other combatant. I looked at my little sister, the woman whose secrets I had kept, whose tears I had dried, whose life I had celebrated as if it were my own. "Brenda," I whispered, the name tasting like ash and poison in my mouth. She didn't even try to deny it. She leaned against the doorframe, setting the bag with the tart on the floor. A slow, smug little smirk played on her lips. She looked at Walter, and he looked at her, and a silent, triumphant conversation passed between them. And then it happened. The thing that broke me. The thing that killed the last shred of hope in my heart. Walter started to laugh. It wasn't a small, nervous chuckle. It was a full, deep-bellied laugh. A laugh of pure, unadulterated mockery, of relief that the secret was finally out. Brenda joined in, a high, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. They stood there in my kitchen, my husband and my sister, laughing. Laughing at my pain, laughing at the utter destruction of my world. The sound echoed off my pristine marble countertops, a grotesque symphony of their shared betrayal. The blood drained from my face. I felt a strange, horrifying sense of detachment, as if I were floating near the ceiling, watching this obscene little play unfold below. The woman standing there, her face a mask of silent horror, couldn't possibly be me. Through his laughter, Walter finally managed to speak, wiping a tear of mirth from the corner of his eye. The words he said will be burned into my memory, seared onto my soul until the day I die. "Oh, come on, Audrey," he gasped, still chuckling. "It's not that serious." What are you going to do? Divorce me? And in that moment, with her cruel laughter ringing in my ears, something inside me didn't just break. It died. The loving wife. The trusting sister. The woman who built her life around these two people. She ceased to exist. She turned to dust and blew away. And in her place, something cold and hard and silent began to form, like a diamond under unimaginable pressure. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the heavy cast-iron skillet at his head, though the image flashed through my mind with vivid clarity. I just stood there, a hollowed-out shell. The laughter eventually died down, sputtering out into awkward silence when they realized I wasn't reacting. They looked at me, a little confused now, their shared amusement giving way to a flicker of uneasy uncertainty. "Audrey, say something," Walter said, his tone still light, but with an underlying edge of command. He was used to me reacting, to us talking things through. My silence was a variable he hadn't accounted for. I didn't. I turned my back on them. A simple, deliberate movement. I walked out of the kitchen, through the dining room with the long mahogany table where we'd hosted so many family Thanksgivings, and started up the grand, curving staircase. Each step on the plush runner felt heavy, monumental. I could hear them following me, their footsteps hesitant on the hardwood floor below. "Where are you going?" "We're talking about this," Walter called after me, a note of panic creeping into his voice. But we weren't talking. They were laughing. I was done talking, forever. I walked into our bedroom, the place that had been my sanctuary. The king-sized bed with the ridiculously high thread count sheets I'd insisted on. The matching walnut nightstands. The life we had built contained in these four walls. I went straight to the walk-in closet, a space I had designed to be organized and serene. On the top shelf, covered in a canvas dust bag, was a set of expensive, hand-stitched Italian leather luggage. I'd bought it for Walter for our 20th anniversary for that trip to Italy we'd taken. He'd loved it, bragging about it to anyone who would listen. I pulled down the largest suitcase. It was heavy, beautifully made, a symbol of our shared history, of our travels, of our life together. I laid it on the pristine white duvet of our bed and unzipped it with a firm, decisive pull. They were standing in the doorway now, watching me, their expressions a strange mix of apprehension and lingering arrogance. "What are you doing?" Brenda asked, her voice laced with a mocking curiosity. "Packing his bags for him? Kicking him out? A little dramatic, don't you think?" I ignored her. I walked over to my side of the closet. My clothes hung in neat, orderly rows, organized by color and season. My silk blouses, my work suits, the beautiful cocktail dress I wore for date nights that had apparently been a complete and utter lie. With a strange, detached calm, I began to take them off the hangers. One by one, I folded them carefully, my hands moving with an eerie precision, smoothing out the wrinkles, and placed them inside the suitcase. His suitcase. The dress I wore to my father's funeral. The sweater he gave me for Christmas 5 years ago. Each item was a memory, a piece of our shared story, and I was packing it all away. The silence in the room stretched thick and suffocating. The only sound was the soft rustle of fabric, the quiet click of hangers. Their amusement was rapidly fading, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. Brenda was the first to finally process what she was seeing. Her voice was a sharp, disbelieving hiss. "Wait, are you packing your clothes in his suitcase?" I continued to pack. My favorite cashmere sweater, my comfortable jeans, my workout clothes. Everything went in. I was a machine, methodical and silent. The cold, hard diamond of resolve inside me was in control now. It was directing my hands, my feet, my every move. They had wanted to see what I would do. I was going to show them. And I wasn't going to say a single solitary word while I did it. Their panic was now palpable, a frantic energy radiating from the doorway. "Audrey, stop this. This is childish. This isn't funny," Walter said, his voice taking on a sharper, more commanding edge. The laughter was a distant memory, replaced by the nervous bluster of a man who was realizing, far too late, that he had fundamentally miscalculated. He had assumed tears, arguments, maybe a plate thrown against a wall. He had not anticipated this cold, silent, methodical dismantling of their life. I ignored him. After packing my essential clothes, I walked into the expansive master bathroom. I grabbed my toiletries from the marble vanity, my expensive face cream that he always complained about the cost of, my Chanel perfume he'd bought me for my 50th birthday, my electric toothbrush. Everything went into a travel bag and then into the suitcase. They just stood there watching. Two useless statues of flesh and blood. My silence was a wall of reinforced concrete they couldn't penetrate. I zipped up the large suitcase with a final, satisfying tug and set it on the floor. Then I went back into the closet and pulled down the matching leather carry-on. The beautiful bag we'd used for weekend trips to wine country. Hello, Earth to Audrey! Are you seriously giving me the silent treatment? So I messed up. It's a big deal, I get it. But you don't just do this. You don't throw away a family. Our family. You torched our family, I thought, as I started packing my shoes and used the flames to keep you warm. I packed my laptop, my work files, the antique silver picture frame from my desk that held a photo of my parents. As I packed, I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where I had slept trustingly beside a liar for who knows how long, and pulled out my phone. My fingers were surprisingly steady. Walter and Brenda exchanged a nervous glance. What are you doing on your phone now? Brenda asked, her voice shrill. I opened my banking app. It was a blessing, really. A stroke of karmic justice that I had always been the one who handled our finances. I was the architect, the planner, the one who managed the investments and paid the bills. The house was in my name. I'd made the down payment with a small inheritance from my grandmother. Most of our assets, the cars, the brokerage account, the emergency fund, were all tied to my accounts, my salary. I scrolled to the list of authorized users on my Amex Platinum card. There was his name, Walter Thompson. I remembered how thrilled he was when I added him. How he'd flashed the heavy metal card at his friends at the golf club. With a simple tap, a confirmation screen popped up. Are you sure you want to remove this user? I pressed confirm without a second's hesitation. A small digital guillotine. Next, the car insurance. The policy for the Lexus he drove so proudly, the one he considered his car, was under my name as part of my multi-car discount plan. I found the number in my contacts and called, putting the phone on speaker. The cheerful, tinny hold music, a generic smooth jazz tune, filled the tense silence of the room. Walter stared at the phone on my lap, his face pale and slack-jawed. Thank you for calling Allstate. This is Maria. How can I help you? Hello, Maria, I said, my voice even, calm. A stranger's voice. I'd like to make a change to my policy. My policy number is 9247. I gave her the details, the Lexus and the primary driver to be removed, Walter Thompson. Audrey, you can't do that. He sputtered, finally rushing forward. I need that car for work. For my clients. Ma'am, the change will be effective immediately, the agent chirped on the other end, oblivious. The vehicle and driver have been removed. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, thank you, Maria. You've been very helpful, I said, and hung up. I looked up at him. His face was a mask of disbelief and impotent fury. You canceled my insurance. I didn't answer. I just went back to my phone, opened the app for our mobile carrier, and with a few more taps, began the process of removing his line from my family plan. His phone would be disconnected by the next billing cycle. One by one, I was cutting the cords that tied him to my life, and more importantly, to my finances. I changed the password to our Amazon Prime account. I changed the password to Netflix. I logged into the smart home app and revoked his access to the security system. Small digital acts of eviction. And with each tap, I felt a piece of my power returning. The look on their faces was a grotesque mixture of panic and sputtering indignation. Brenda, who had been silently observing with a look of smug superiority, now looked genuinely frightened. The foundation of the comfortable, subsidized life she was trying to insert herself into was being demolished before her very eyes. This is insane, Walter stammered, running a hand through his thinning hair. You're throwing away 25 years of marriage over a few stupid texts. A few stupid texts? My voice was dangerously low. A growl that came from the depths of my shattered soul. It was the first time I'd spoken directly to him in what felt like an eternity. The cold diamond of resolve inside me was now heating up, turning into a white-hot, focused rage. I held out my hand. Give me your phone. What? No, he said, clutching it protectively to his chest like a child with a toy. Walter, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument or negotiation. You can give it to me now, or I will consider that a full and complete confession, and my lawyer will subpoena it in the divorce proceedings. And trust me, it will look much, much worse for you then. Your choice. I knew using those words would get his attention. It did. He hesitated, his jaw tight with fury, then practically threw the phone at me. It landed softly on the duvet. I picked it up, I unlocked it. The passcode was 1121125, the birthday of our first dog, a goofy golden retriever named Sadie, who had died 10 years ago. He hadn't even bothered to change it. The intimacy of that knowledge, the shared secret of that number, now felt like a violation. I opened his messages with Brenda. It wasn't just a few texts. It was a novel, an epic of deceit. It went back months. I scrolled and scrolled, my heart turning to a block of ice in my chest. The sheer volume of their communication was staggering. Good morning texts. Good night texts. Flirtatious banter during the workday. Then there were the pictures. Pictures of my sister in lingerie I had never seen, posing suggestively in what looked like a hotel room. Pictures that made me physically ill. There were inside jokes, cruel nicknames for me, vile comments about my work, my friends, my body. They had built a whole secret world, and the foundation of that world was their shared contempt for me. Then I found it. The thread from last month. Walter had told me he was going on a business trip, a sales conference in Florida. I had helped him pack. I had driven him to the airport at 5:02 a.m. I had texted him every night, telling him I missed him. It was all a lie. The messages laid it out in sickening, pornographic detail. It was a romantic getaway with Brenda. She had flown down to meet him. They'd stayed at the St. Regis, a 5-star luxury beach resort. And the worst part, the final soul-crushing blow? I found the email confirmation he had forwarded to her, the one with the final bill. It had been paid for with my American Express card, the one I had just canceled. The trip had cost over $8,000. My hands were shaking now, not from weakness, but from pure, unadulterated fury. I looked up from the screen, my eyes locking onto theirs. They both looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I decided to read one of the messages out loud, my voice dripping with venom. Brenda, does she suspect anything? Worried she'll check the credit card statement. I paused, letting the words hang in the air like toxic smoke. Walter, not a clue. She's too busy managing her little empire to notice me. Besides, she thinks my promotion is coming through, so she won't question any expenses right now. She's predictable. My little empire. The business I had built from the ground up with sleepless nights and weekends sacrificed at the altar of its success. The business that paid for this house. For his Lexus. For his golf club membership. For their secret sordid vacation. The rage was so intense I felt like I might actually combust. You took my money, I said, my voice shaking with the effort of keeping it level, to take my sister on a vacation while lying to my face about a promotion that was never even real. Walter had the nerve to look ashamed for a fleeting second. Brenda, however, just crossed her arms, her chin jutting out in defiance. He deserved a little fun, she said, her voice dripping with poison. You've been so wrapped up in your work for years. You barely pay attention to him anyway. What did you expect? That was it. The final, unforgivable betrayal. Not just the affair. Not just the theft. But the justification, the blame. In their twisted, selfish minds, this was somehow my fault. The last vestiges of love, of history, of family connection I had for either of them evaporated in that moment, replaced by nothing but a vast, empty expanse of contempt. I felt a strange, chilling clarity. The path forward, which had been a chaotic mess of pain and confusion moments before, was now illuminated by the harsh, bright fire of my anger. There was nothing left to salvage here. Nothing left to say to these two monstrously selfish people. I closed his phone and tossed it onto the bed. Then I pulled out my own phone again, for the last time in this house. My fingers flew across the screen, my movements efficient and precise. What now? Walter asked, his voice wary, like he was speaking to a wild animal he wasn't sure would attack. Who are you calling now? My mother? I didn't answer him. I dialed my best friend Janice. We'd been friends since college. Had seen each other through everything. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, Audrey, what's up? Her cheerful, familiar voice came through the speaker, a lifeline from the sane world. Janice, I said, and my voice finally broke, just for a second. A single crack in the icy facade. Can I come and stay with you for a few days? I need to get out of here. The cheerfulness vanished from her voice, replaced by immediate, urgent concern. Oh my God, of course. What happened? Are you okay? Where are you? I'm at home, I said, looking directly at Walter as the words came out of my mouth. Walter's been cheating on me. With Brenda. There was a stunned, horrified silence on the other end of the line. Then a string of curses that made me almost smile. That absolute bastard. That snake. Of course you can stay. Don't even ask. I'm on my way to get you right now. No, I said quickly. Don't come here. I don't want you in this house with them. I'm leaving now. I'll take an Uber. Okay, honey. The spare room is always ready for you. You know that. The door will be unlocked. Just get here safely. And Audrey, you call me the second you are in that car. I will. Thank you, I whispered and hung up. Next, I opened the Uber app. I put in Janice's address. The map showed a little car icon just a few blocks away. 5 minutes. The reality of the situation, the finality of it, finally seemed to crash down on them. This wasn't a temporary dramatic gesture. This wasn't a tantrum. I was leaving. I was really, truly leaving. Wait, you can't just leave. Brenda cried out, her defiance crumbling into a pathetic, childish whine. This is your house. Exactly, I said, my voice cold again. It is my house, which is why I'm the one who gets to leave it. You two can stay here. For now. Walter moved to block the doorway, planting his feet like a sentry. Audrey, please. Let's just sit down and talk about this like adults. We can fix this. I know we can. We can go to counseling. Counseling? I let out a laugh. A bitter, humorless sound that was more like a bark. You think a 60-minute session with a therapist can fix this? You think we can talk our way back from this? There is nothing to fix. A marriage, a relationship, those are structures that can be repaired. But this is a toxic waste dump. And I am evacuating. My phone buzzed. My Uber was outside. I grabbed the handles of the 2 heavy leather suitcases. They were filled with the curated pieces of the life I thought I had. A life that was now nothing but dead weight. I started rolling them towards the bedroom door. They both rushed forward, trying to stop me. Brenda grabbed at one of the suitcases, fumbling with the zipper. You're not going anywhere. We need to talk. Walter put his hands on my shoulders, his grip surprisingly strong. Audrey, please don't do this. Think about what you're throwing away. I stopped. I looked down at his hands on my shoulders, the hands of a stranger. Then I looked up at his face, a face I no longer recognized. Then I glanced over at my sister, who was desperately trying to unpack my shoes as if that would somehow keep me there. I felt a wave of disgust so profound it almost made me gag. I shrugged his hands off me with a force that surprised even myself. I looked at both of them, these 2 people who had been the twin pillars of my universe. Now just pathetic, selfish strangers standing in the wreckage they had created. You asked me what I was going to do, I said, my voice steady and clear and final. I'm going to live without either of you. And with that, I rolled my suitcases past them, down the grand staircase, and out the heavy oak front door of my house for the very last time. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, shocking me back into my own body. The Uber, a clean black sedan, was waiting at the curb, its engine humming quietly. The driver, a kind-faced man with graying temples and a gentle smile, got out immediately when he saw me struggling with the heavy bags. Here, ma'am, let me get those for you, he said, his voice soft. He expertly lifted the suitcases and settled them into the trunk. He must have seen the look on my face, the tear tracks on my cheeks, the tremor in my hands, because he didn't ask any questions. He just opened the back door for me and gave me a simple, sympathetic nod. The moment I slid into the back seat and the door clicked shut, the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for the past hour vanished, as if a switch had been flipped. It left behind a hollow, cavernous emptiness that was almost worse than the rage. The car pulled away from the curb, and I watched my beautiful home, the one with the perfectly manicured lawn and the welcoming gaslights I'd had installed last year, recede into the darkness. My home, my sanctuary. And they were still in it. The thought was a physical violation. Then my phone, which I was still clutching in a white-knuckled grip, started to blow up. First, it was Walter. The screen lit up with his name and photo. A picture of us in Napa smiling a lifetime ago. I stared at it, then pressed the red button to decline the call with a vicious jab of my thumb. A second later, a text message appeared. Audrey, pick up the phone. This is insane. You're behaving like a child. I ignored it. Then Brenda. Her name popped up, and a fresh wave of nausea and betrayal rolled over me. I declined her call too. A string of texts followed, one after the other, a rapid-fire assault. You can't do this to us. This is your family you're walking out on. You are destroying everything with your selfishness. I was destroying everything? The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it all was almost impressive. The phone kept buzzing, vibrating against my leg, a relentless electronic tether to the two people I now despised more than anyone on earth. It felt like they were trying to pull me back, to drag me back into the toxicity and the lies through that little glowing device. Walter called again. This time, a voicemail notification popped up. Then Brenda. Then Walter again. I watched the screen light up with their names, flashing in the dark car like warning signals. With 2 decisive taps, I found their contacts. And I blocked them. The buzzing stopped. The silence in the car was suddenly deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the tires on the asphalt. And in that quiet, as the familiar streetlights of my neighborhood blurred past the window, it finally hit me. The full, crushing, tectonic weight of it all. 25 years of marriage. 50 years of sisterhood. Gone. Vaporized in a single night of cruel laughter and breathtaking betrayal. I looked out the window at the blurry lights of other people's homes, other people's normal lives, and realized silent tears were streaming down my face again, the salt from them stinging the raw skin on my cheeks. I wasn't sobbing. It was a quiet, hopeless kind of weeping for a life that was now over, for a future that had been stolen from me. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his expression full of concern. "Everything all right, ma'am?" he asked softly. I couldn't find my voice to answer, so I just nodded, a pathetic little jerk of my head. Then I whispered, mostly to myself, a promise to the broken woman reflected in the window. "It will be." And in the quiet of that car, with my whole world packed into a suitcase that wasn't even mine, I felt completely and utterly alone. But telling this story, sharing this with you, it makes me feel a little less alone. The first night at Janice's was a blur of shock and exhaustion. She met me at the door, wrapped me in a huge hug, and didn't let go for a full minute. She didn't press me for details, didn't ask 1,000 questions. She just guided me to her spare room, a cozy, safe space, and brought me a cup of tea and a Xanax. I think I slept, but it was a restless, dream-filled sleep, haunted by the sound of their laughter. I woke up on Saturday morning feeling like I'd been in a car crash, every part of me aching. But the cold core of resolve inside me was still there. It had hardened overnight into something unbreakable. Janice was my rock. She sat with me at her kitchen table while I stared into a coffee cup. And when I was ready, she didn't offer platitudes. She offered a plan. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. "What's the first step?" "A lawyer," I said, my own voice surprising me with its steadiness. "Not just any lawyer. The best, most ruthless divorce lawyer in the city." Janice nodded, already typing on her laptop. "I know a guy. They call him the Shark. He handled my cousin's nasty divorce." By 9 a.m. on Monday morning, I was sitting in the sterile, overly air-conditioned office of Mr. Arthur Henderson, a man with a shock of white hair, piercing blue eyes, and a reputation for being a shark in a $3,000 tailored suit. I needed a shark. The office was on the 40th floor, with a panoramic view of the city I had helped build. I felt a small, grim sense of irony. I told him everything. I laid it all out on the polished surface of his mahogany desk, the 25-year marriage, the fact that I was the primary earner with documentation to prove it. The house in my name, purchased with my inheritance. I explained the financial entanglement, the cars, the accounts. Then I told him about Walter and Brenda and the events of Thursday night. I had saved the texts from their friends and the unblocked numbers. I played him the voicemail messages they had started leaving. A pathetic, chaotic mix of feigned remorse, angry accusations, and desperate pleading. Mr. Henderson listened patiently, his face impassive, occasionally jotting down a note on a yellow legal pad. He didn't interrupt. When I finally finished, my throat raw, he took off his gold-rimmed glasses and polished them slowly with a silk cloth. "Well, Audrey," he said, his voice calm and deeply reassuring, "this is a mess. A heartbreaking, despicable mess. But from a legal standpoint, it's remarkably clean." He confirmed what I already suspected. Since I was the sole owner on the deed to the house, Walter and Brenda were, in legal terms, tenants at will with no lease. They were my guests, and their invitation had been well and truly revoked. "We will begin the divorce proceedings immediately, citing adultery with extreme prejudice," he explained, his voice crisp and professional. "We will also file for an emergency order to freeze all joint assets, though it sounds like there are very few. And most importantly, we will serve them with a formal, legally binding eviction notice. They will have 30 days to vacate your property. If they refuse, We will have them removed by the county sheriff. The words felt both terrifying and empowering. Eviction. Sheriff. This was real. This was the mechanism of my freedom. He drafted the papers right there, his paralegal flying into action. The formal notice was dispatched with a process server that very afternoon. I paid the extra fee to have it served immediately. I pictured the scene, a stern-looking stranger showing up at the door of my beautiful house and handing them the crisp, cold legal documents, demanding they leave. Their reaction was immediate and nuclear. My phone, which had been blissfully quiet since I blocked them, started vibrating with notifications from unknown numbers and newly created email addresses. They had resorted to new tactics to bypass my blocks. The emails were a torrent of rage and delusion. From Walter using a new Gmail account, an eviction notice. After everything I've given to this family, after all the support I've given your career, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. You can't just throw me out on the street. I have rights. From Brenda, from an equally new account, you are a cold, heartless monster. I am your sister. I have rights as a resident. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home too now. I forwarded every single message to Mr. Henderson with the simple note, "For your files." He replied almost instantly, "Excellent. Every message is another nail in their coffin. Keep documenting everything." The battle lines had been drawn. They thought they could bully me, that they could intimidate me into backing down with empty threats. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. They had forgotten that I was the one who built the empire they were so comfortably squatting in. And I was about to remind them with the full force of the law behind me. I knew it was coming. I had been dreading it more than the confrontation with Walter and Brenda, more than the meeting with the lawyer. The phone call. It came on a Saturday morning, a week after I'd left. I was at Janice's kitchen table, sketching designs for a new project on a notepad, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the meticulous, ordered world of lines and angles. The phone rang and the caller ID showed a number I knew as well as my own. Mom. My hand hovered over the phone. A part of me, the wounded child part, wanted to just let it ring, to retreat back into the safe cocoon of silence I was building around my shattered heart. But the architect in me, the part that confronts problems head-on, knew I couldn't. I had to face this. I took a deep, fortifying breath and answered. "Hello, Mom. Audrey." "Thank God." Her voice was frantic, breathless, with a manufactured drama I knew all too well. "I've been calling and calling. Brenda finally told me what happened. She said you had some sort of breakdown, some horrible misunderstanding, and you kicked them out of the house." A breakdown. A misunderstanding. That was the story they were spinning, of course. It painted me as the unstable one, them as the victims. It was masterful in its cruelty. "That's not what happened, Mom," I said, my voice tired, devoid of the energy needed for this fight. "Audrey, how could you do this?" She barreled on, not listening, her words a tidal wave of guilt. "He's your husband for 25 years. And Brenda, my God, Audrey, she is your sister, your baby sister." She called me sobbing, said she has nowhere to go. You can't just throw your own sister out on the street. The injustice of it all was like a physical blow. The fact that her first concern was for the perpetrator, not the victim. "Mom," I said, my voice getting colder. "Did they tell you why I left? Did they tell you that I found them together? That they've been having an affair for months behind my back, in my house, spending my money?" There was a pause. A short, telling silence. I could hear her taking a shaky breath. "Well," she finally said, her voice softer but still laced with reproach. "Brenda said it was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. She feels awful. People make mistakes, Audrey. Good people. Family is supposed to forgive. You can't just throw away a 25-year marriage and your relationship with your sister over one mistake." "One mistake?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Mom, it was not one mistake. It was hundreds of mistakes. Hundreds of lies. Every single day. And when I confronted them, they laughed in my face. They stood in my kitchen and they laughed. Brenda is very fragile right now," my mother continued, her voice taking on a whiny, pleading tone I despised. "She's always looked up to you. And Walter is your husband. For better or for worse, remember your vows. You owe it to your family, to your father's memory, to try and work this out." That was the word that did it. "Owe. Owe them?" I said, my voice now like ice. "I owe them nothing. I have given them everything for years. I paid for Brenda's graduate school application fees. I gave Walter a no-interest loan to start his failed consulting business. I paid for their secret vacation. What I owe is to myself. I owe it to myself to not be a doormat, to not be a fool, and to not allow my home to be a brothel for my husband and my sister. They have 30 days to find a new place to live. That's more generosity than they deserve. I could hear her starting to cry on the other end. The wet, gulping sobs of someone who isn't getting their way. You're tearing this family apart, Audrey. You're being so selfish. No, Mom, I said, the last bit of hope I had for her support, for her motherly protection, dying in my heart. I'm not. They already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I ended the call. I sat there in the silence of Janice's sunny kitchen, the notepad with my beautiful, orderly designs mocking me from the table. I realized with a profound and painful clarity that I hadn't just lost a husband and a sister. In a way, I had lost my mother, too. Her loyalty, I now saw, was not to her children, but to the fragile, idealized image of a perfect family she wanted to project to the world. And I had just smashed that image to pieces. I was truly completely on my own. The next 2 weeks were a strange, surreal limbo. I lived at Janice's, working remotely and trying to create a new routine. Janice was a saint, giving me space when I needed it and forcing me to eat when I forgot. The days were a blur of legal emails, work calls, and long, aimless walks. The nights were the hardest, filled with a suffocating loneliness. Meanwhile, Walter and Brenda's desperation campaign escalated. Having failed to break me with emotional blackmail from my mother, they resorted to a campaign of petty, infuriating harassment. It started with the finances. I got another fraud alert, this time from my brokerage account. Someone had tried to log in and initiate a wire transfer. The security protocols I had put in place with my financial advisor held, and the attempt was blocked. I knew it was Walter. He was testing the fences, looking for a weak spot. Then came the social media smear campaign. Brenda, who had always been obsessed with her online image, posted a long, rambling, tear-stained story on Facebook. She was clever. She didn't mention the affair, of course. She painted a picture of a concerned, heartbroken sister, worried about her older sibling's sudden and alarming mental instability. She claimed I had become paranoid and delusional, that I was under extreme stress from work, and that I had thrown them out into the cold based on a terrible misunderstanding. She ended the post with a plea for her friends to pray for me and my healing. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive victimhood. My phone started buzzing with messages from distant relatives and old family friends, all expressing their concern. Is everything okay, Audrey? Heard you're going through a tough time. Brenda is so worried about you. I don't usually engage in social media drama. It's undignified. But this was a calculated attack on my sanity and my reputation. It required a response. I didn't write a long post. I didn't get into a war of words. I simply went to her post and left a single public comment. Ask her about the business conference at the St. Regis in Florida last month. Then ask her who paid for it. I have the credit card receipts charged to my account. It seems misunderstandings are quite expensive these days. The comments section exploded. People started asking questions. Within an hour, Brenda's entire post and all the comments had been deleted. But they weren't done. The pettiness escalated into the bizarre. My weekly grocery delivery from Fresh Market was mysteriously canceled. My subscription to the New York Times was suspended for non-payment, even though it was on autopay. A dozen pizzas showed up at Janice's front door one night, ordered in my name. Small, incredibly childish things designed to disrupt my life and get under my skin. Each time, I calmly fixed the issue. I called the credit card company and disputed the charge for the pizzas. I reinstated my subscriptions with new payment information, and I documented everything. Every canceled subscription, every fraudulent pizza order, every manipulative social media post. I created a folder in my email and sent a summary to Mr. Henderson every evening. His replies were always brief and encouraging. This is excellent. They are building our case for us. They thought they were harassing me into submission. What they were actually doing was methodically documenting their own instability and malice. They were so blinded by their own entitlement and rage that they couldn't see they weren't fighting me anymore. They were fighting themselves. And they were losing badly. Each petty act was another shovel full of dirt on their own graves. The harassment was a constant low-level hum of stress in the background of my life. I was becoming numb to it, learning to treat it as a logistical problem to be solved rather than an emotional assault. I was focusing on my own path forward. I spent my days at Janice's, working remotely, and I started the painful but necessary process of untangling my life. I was also looking at new apartments online, scrolling through listings for smaller, brighter places just for me. The thought of starting over at 52 was terrifying, but with each passing day, it also felt more and more like a necessary, exhilarating liberation. Then they crossed a line, a bright red, irrevocable line from which there was no coming back. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on a conference call for work when an email popped up on my screen. It was from my primary bank, the one that held my mortgage and my main checking account. The subject line was innocuous, an update on your recent application. I frowned. I hadn't applied for anything. I opened the email. It was a standard automated message. "Congratulations on your new auto loan," it said cheerfully. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. The voices on my conference call faded into a distant, meaningless buzz. I hadn't applied for an auto loan. My hands trembling, I clicked the link in the email. It took me to a loan document. There it was, in black and white, an application for a $70,000 loan for a brand new Lexus SUV, the same model Walter had been complaining he wanted for months. It had been submitted online using my full name, my address, my date of birth, and my social security number. And because of my excellent credit score, it had been instantly approved. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't pettiness anymore. This wasn't childish harassment. This was a felony. This was calculated criminal identity theft. They were trying to saddle me with crippling debt, to ruin the financial stability I had worked my entire life to build. I excused myself from the conference call, my voice a strained whisper. I immediately called the bank's fraud department. The woman on the other end, a calm professional named Linda, listened patiently as I frantically explained the situation, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "Yes, ma'am, I see the application here," she said after a few moments of typing. "It was submitted this morning from an IP address linked to your home Wi-Fi network in Northwood." Of course it was. They had used my own internet service, the one I paid for, to commit a federal crime against me. The audacity was simply unbelievable. Linda immediately froze the loan and opened a high-priority investigation. But I knew I couldn't stop there. This was no longer just a messy, painful divorce. This had escalated into something far more dangerous. With a heavy heart and a sense of grim finality, I did something I never in my wildest nightmares thought I would do. I picked up the phone and called the police department. I asked to file a formal report for identity theft and attempted grand larceny against my husband, Walter Thompson, and my sister, Brenda Clark. I had to drive to the local precinct. I sat in a sterile, uncomfortable plastic chair under flickering fluorescent lights and recounted the entire sordid story to a tired-looking detective named Miller. I had to give him my social security number, my date of birth, all the intimate details of my life that they had stolen and twisted for their own gain. I showed him the emails, the eviction notice, the loan application. Detective Miller was surprisingly kind, his eyes full of a weary sympathy. "Ma'am," he said when I was done, leaning back in his squeaky chair, "you did the right thing. We see this kind of thing, coercive control, financial abuse, more than you think in contentious separations. They've given us a very clear motive and a digital trail to follow. We'll open an investigation immediately." When I walked out of the police station into the late afternoon sun, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty and incredibly sad. They had been so consumed by their greed and their pathological desire to hurt me that they had been willing to risk their own freedom. They had forced my hand, and now the consequences would be out of my control. The family drama had now become a police matter, and I knew with a chilling certainty that this was the beginning of the end. The final days leading up to the eviction deadline were filled with a tense, ominous silence. The harassing emails stopped. The unknown numbers stopped calling. It was the calm before the storm, a dead, heavy quiet that was more unsettling than their noise had been. I spent the time in a flurry of activity, finalizing the lease on a new apartment and arranging for movers, trying to focus on the future instead of the impending confrontation. The 30th day arrived. It was a gray, overcast Friday morning, the sky threatening rain. Mr. Henderson had arranged for me to meet him at the house at 10 a.m. to formally retake possession. He had been adamant. "Do not go alone, Audrey. I will be there, and I have already coordinated with the local sheriff's department. 2 deputies will meet us there as a civil standby." When I pulled up to my own street, a street I had lived on for 15 years, my heart was pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I saw Mr. Henderson's black Mercedes parked behind two official-looking sheriff's department vehicles. He was waiting for me on the sidewalk, his face grim, a leather briefcase in his hand. "They're still inside," he said quietly as I walked up. They refused to answer the door for the deputies. My stomach churned with a mixture of fear and anger. I had hoped foolishly that they would just be gone, that they would have packed their things and slunk away in the night, leaving me to pick up the pieces in peace. Of course, they wouldn't make it that easy. The two sheriff's deputies were professional and firm. They were large men, and their presence was both intimidating and deeply reassuring. The senior deputy knocked on the heavy oak door one last time, his knuckles making a loud, authoritative sound. "Sheriff's Department." "Open the door." Silence. "All right," he said, turning to his partner. He used a tool to bypass the lock, and the door swung open with a soft click. "Ma'am, Mr. Henderson, please stay behind us." We stepped inside. The stench hit me first. A vile combination of stale cigarette smoke, rotting garbage, and cheap air freshener. The house, my beautiful, immaculate house, was destroyed. The pristine oak floors were scuffed and stained. Garbage was everywhere. Greasy pizza boxes, empty wine bottles, overflowing trash bags piled in the corners. My beautiful silk curtains had been torn from the rods. The plush gray sectional couch had a long, deliberate slash across the cushions, its white stuffing spilling out like intestines. The framed photos on the mantelpiece had been shattered, the glass crunching under our feet as we walked. My life in silver frames smashed to bits. And on the living room wall, right above the fireplace, scrawled in what looked like bright red lipstick, were the words, "Money-loving witch." I felt a wave of dizziness and leaned against the doorframe for support. This wasn't just mess. This was malice. This was a deliberate, hateful act of desecration. We found them in the master bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bare mattress, which was also stained. They were surrounded by a few hastily packed bags. They looked pathetic, defeated. Their once beautiful clothes were rumpled, their faces pale and drawn. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen, childish resentment. "You need to vacate the premises immediately," the senior deputy said, his voice booming in the trashed room. Walter just stared at the floor, refusing to look at me. But Brenda, my sister, looked up, her eyes filled with a venomous, unadulterated hatred. "I hope you're happy, Audrey," she spat, her voice cracking. "You've destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything, Brenda," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I just turned on the lights." Just as the deputies were preparing to escort them out, there was a knock on the open front door. Two new figures appeared in the hallway. They were dressed in plain clothes, a man and a woman, and they held up badges in leather wallets. "Detectives," the man said, his eyes scanning the room. "We're here to speak with Walter Thompson and Brenda Clark." A new kind of fear, cold and sharp and utterly different from the fear of eviction, flashed across Walter's and Brenda's faces. This wasn't about the house anymore. The lead detective, who I recognized as Detective Miller from the precinct, turned to them. "We have a warrant to search the premises and seize any electronic devices. This is in relation to an ongoing investigation into felony identity theft and bank fraud." Brenda started to cry, a high, wailing, theatrical sound. Walter just sagged, as if all the bones had been removed from his body. He looked 20 years older. The detectives read them their Miranda rights, the familiar words from 1,000 TV shows, now a chilling reality in my own bedroom. They placed my husband and my sister in handcuffs. As they were led out of the house, past the wreckage of the life we had once shared, Walter finally looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a hollow, empty despair. He knew it was over, all of it. I stood there in the middle of my ruined home and watched them being placed into the back of separate, unmarked police cars. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt an overwhelming, profound sense of quiet, blessed relief. The storm had finally passed. The house was a wreck, but it was my wreck, and it was finally quiet. The months that followed were a painful, methodical process of cleaning up. There was the physical cleanup, which required a professional crew who specialized in biohazards and property damage. It took weeks. There was the legal cleanup, which involved endless meetings with Mr. Henderson, insurance adjusters, and the district attorney's office. And then there was the emotional cleanup, the hardest part of all, which is still ongoing. The legal case against them was a slam dunk. The detectives found the loan applications and a host of other incriminating evidence on Walter's laptop, which had been seized from my bedroom. Faced with irrefutable digital evidence, both he and Brenda took a plea deal to avoid a longer, more public trial. They avoided prison time, a fact that initially angered me, but Mr. Henderson helped me see it differently. "A trial would have been a circus, Audrey," he'd said. "This is cleaner and the consequences are still severe." He was right. They were each sentenced to 5 years of probation, ordered to pay restitution for the damages to the house, and had to complete 500 hours of community service. They both now had felony criminal records. Their professional and personal lives were in ruins. Walter was fired from his job. Brenda's nursing license was put under review. They had become pariahs. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly, thanks to their criminal actions and the mountain of evidence of adultery and financial abuse. Walter got nothing. The house, the savings, the investments, my 401k, my pension, they were all protected as my premarital assets and personal earnings. He walked away with his clothes, his debt, and his criminal record. Last I heard from a mutual acquaintance, he was living in a cheap rental apartment across town, working a low-level sales job selling office supplies. Brenda's fate was in some ways even sadder. Our mother, finally forced to confront the ugly, undeniable truth, was devastated. She tried to support Brenda, but their relationship, already strained, fractured under the weight of the shame and disappointment. Brenda lost most of her friends who were horrified by what she had done. She moved 2 states away to live with an aunt, trying to escape her ruined reputation. We have not spoken a single word since the day she was arrested. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever hear from her again. As for me, I couldn't bear to stay in that house. I couldn't sleep in that bedroom or cook in that kitchen. It was tainted with too many bad memories stained by their betrayal. I had the professional crew restore it to its former beauty. Every wall repainted, every floor refinished. And then I put it on the market. It sold in a week. I took the proceeds and bought a small, sunny 2-bedroom apartment in a modern high-rise in the city. It has a balcony that overlooks the park. And it's all mine. The day I moved in, carrying a single box of my most treasured belongings, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I spent weeks decorating it. Not with things to impress others, but with things that made me happy. I bought a ridiculously comfortable velvet armchair. I started an indoor herb garden. I enrolled in a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do. My first few creations were lopsided and ugly, but the feeling of the cool, wet clay spinning in my hands, of creating something new from a lump of earth, felt like a powerful metaphor for my own life. One day I was cleaning up the last few boxes from the move, and I found them, tucked away in the back of the storage unit, the expensive Italian leather suitcases I had bought for Walter all those years ago. The ones I had used to pack my things on that terrible night. I stood there for a long time just looking at them, these symbols of a life and a love that had been a lie. I didn't hesitate. I dragged them down to the building's large dumpster and threw them in, one after the other. They made a satisfying thud as they hit the bottom. The next day, I went out and bought myself a brand new set of luggage. It was lightweight, durable, and a beautiful, vibrant shade of sapphire blue. It was mine. My life is smaller now and much quieter, but it's real, it's honest, and it's entirely my own. Last week I booked a trip, a solo trip, 2 weeks on the coast of Spain, something I've always dreamed of. I'm going to eat tapas, drink wine, and sit on the beach and read books. Sometimes late at night when the city is quiet, I still hear their laughter. I still remember Walter's smug, taunting question. "What are you going to do? Divorce me?" He thought it was a threat. He thought it was the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. He had no idea it would be the beginning of my salvation. He had no idea that I would do exactly that, and so much more. I would not only divorce him, I would dismantle the life he took for granted. I would hold him and my sister accountable for their crimes. And I would build a new life from the ashes, a life of my own making, one carefully chosen piece at a time. And that's my story. It was the hardest, most painful thing I've ever been through, but I came out the other side. If you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever been made to feel small or foolish, I hope hearing this lets you know that you are not alone, and that you are so much stronger than you think. What would you have done in my shoes? Or have you ever faced something so shocking that it completely redefined your life? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.